So, thank you everyone for coming. I know I scheduled this earlier tonight, but for me, it's imperative that we meet with the audit team. They're here to present to you, and I'm happy to say 2022 is done. And I'm sure they're just as happy, as is Erica. So, with that being said, they've prepared a presentation. Erica and Joe have worked to make copies of this presentation for you. Tomorrow we will be emailing you the management letter and also publishing it on our website. So, but we wanted you guys to hear it first, so the floor is yours.
All right, very good. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Carl Widmer. I'm the partner from Drescher Malecki that was on the audit. With me tonight is Jared Picard. He's the senior manager on the audit. For tonight, I told Jared he could probably just take a side seat here, and if you guys ask any hard questions, I'll tap on him. But here tonight, I also presented on the audit for the year ended 2021. It was a bit in the past now, but as far as the presentation that's prepared for tonight, a few short slides. It's similar to the last time we did this. We find that this helps cover a little bit of the audit process itself, and then dips into the dollars a little bit from a high level, and then wraps up with some observations and a chance to take any questions if anybody had them. So for tonight, yes, these are the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2022. Yes, it's February 2024, so this is highly anticipated, but I'm sure the people in this room are familiar with the situation for the past year and a half. Unfortunately, there's some turnover in key positions that affect this process, and something that we typically start in April or May. We didn't receive records that were ready to be audited until the week of Thanksgiving. So the turnaround time, if you put where we are today and issuing last week, it's actually the fastest turnaround on an audit. So I just wanted to acknowledge the people that were involved. It took a lot of work to get there, but once we got those records, it was a really smooth process. Everybody was helpful throughout the process. We didn't encounter any difficulty with people throughout the course of the audit. So that's important in a year when there's delays like this. So we can go through on the first slide here, and I think there are copies handed out if you can't see up here, but just to start to get you familiar with what the deliverables are from Drescher Malecki. Each year, what you can expect. Of course, the financial statements. That's probably the main product that everyone will associate the audit with. That's going to include the balances at December 31st for all of your balance sheet items, for all of your funds, as well as all of the revenue and expenditure activity for the 12 months that are ending. Within that document is our audit opinion. That's really why we're hired. These financial statements, they can get put together in-house, but users of your financial statements are looking for that independent audit third opinion. They want that assurance from an outside party, a CPA firm in this case, that the numbers that are in these financial statements can be relied upon as being accurate. So that's why we're hired, and our audit opinion concludes that these dollars can be relied upon, that they are fairly stated. At the back of the financial statements is a special compliance audit, and that's because the city receives and then spends a significant amount of federal aid. So anytime you have federal dollars come through these halls and they're spent, if you spend more than $750,000 in one fiscal year, you're subject to what's called a single audit. So with that, we take the Fed's guidance, the compliance 1,000-page booklet, and we find what programs went through the city, select certain programs, and then perform strictly a compliance audit under federal standards. So this past year, for the fiscal year of 2022, total federal awards were over $6 million, and they were primarily spent with your ARPA money, which was over $4 million, and your Community Development Block Grant Program, which is just shy of $1.5 million. Those programs were tested. Tied to, I think, some of the inconsistency in staffing, there was a compliance finding in the ARPA program In addition to handling the dollars in a fiduciary responsibly way with every federal program, ARPA has specific reporting requirements where they want a bunch of information about what are you spending this money on uploaded to their portal. We take a look at that information just to make sure that it's happening. What we found was several of the projects were misclassified or miscategorized, so we had to report a compliance finding on that. The good news is this is an area that can be addressed in subsequent reports. So we've spoken with the mayor and the comptroller on what a corrective action plan would look like, and you can make that fix, and we would expect that that finding is alleviated come next year when we come back. In addition to a federal compliance audit, New York State Department of Transportation has a similar setup. So if you spend over $750,000 of New York State DOT aid, you're subject to a compliance audit there. We do that also for the city, and the CHIPS program was selected for testing. No audit findings, clean audit on that. The last two items are just other letter communications from our office to the city. First is the auditor communications. This is really where we revisit what the city as the auditee's responsibilities were, and what Drescher Malecki as the auditor, what our responsibilities were to perform the audit. And it essentially states that all the information is the city, that you've made all the information available to us as the auditors, and then our responsibility is to perform an audit under our standards, governmental auditing standards, which culminates our opinion. And there's a few more intricacies that are in that letter if you want it, but a couple of items I want to highlight for this group, if you hear it once a year, it's important to hear it, is first is independence is one of the things that is communicated. And I mentioned before, if the city's financial statements are going to be used by readers, whether it be resident taxpayers, banking agencies, the bond market, granting agencies who are giving money to the city, they're looking for that third-party verification. It's imperative then that that third party is independent and free of any conflicts of interest from the city. So each year we revisit our relationships with all members on the council, with key management, and say, is there anything that would impair our independence as the external auditors that we should maybe back out of this engagement? So each year we revisit that, no conflicts of interest to report on, so we're good there. The other piece is the roles and the responsibilities of the financial statements. You might pick up that document and say, we put the auditor's report up on the website. It's not our report. It's the city's financial statement. The few pages that are on our letterhead, our opinion, that's what we take ownership for. We audit the city's records. We don't create them or take ownership of them. So I just like to state that the records, all of that, it's the city's property. We simply come in and perform our audit procedures over them. And tied to that, that audit is designed to gain assurance over the dollar amounts in the financial statements. It's not designed to find and detect fraud. And I think when you hear auditors, there's an association there that sometimes there's an expectation we're searching for fraud. There's certainly an element of considering fraud risk during the preparation and the planning of our audit, but our tests are designed to gain assurance over dollar amounts. It's not to look for fraud. So I just like to say that to the group also. If you wanted, a special audit searching for fraud, you would hire probably a forensic accountant.
So I can keep that money tonight.
No comment. And then finally, there's a management letter. The mayor mentioned that before. This is an area where, the city is one of our clients, but we have many municipal clients. So there's a lot of things that we see that we think could benefit the city's operations. So if a certain policy that we see at another city or county we think might lend itself to the city, we want to share that with you. So it's really full of recommendations and best practices. So you can read through that and look at some of the ideas. I think our information is on the last slide. If it isn't, you'll have my contact information. If anything comes up, feel free to reach out to Jared or myself. Are there any questions on the audit process side of things before we move into some of the dollars? Okay, next slide please. So the focus for the few financial slides we have tonight is the general fund. It's where the majority of the activity is happening for the city. So the first one that we look at is a line graph with the blue portion being your money coming in, your revenues. The red portion are your expenditures or money going out. And we're doing a 5-year look back. Now what you see is 2022, you're seeing an incline, but it's on both sides, and it's pretty easily explained. So for 2018 through 2021, what you would anticipate, slight increases, really just keeping up with the costs. 2022, the city finally started utilizing some of that ARPA money. So in addition to ARPA, you also were the beneficiary of receiving some state grants as well. So there's an increase of $7-8 million in both revenues and expenditures for this year. You receive that much of grant money and you spend it on certain projects or purchases. So that really explains it. Outside of that, operations-wise, revenues and expenditures were very comparable to prior years. So the net difference, you had money coming in or revenues of $45 million, total expenditures of $43.8. The difference there is $1.2 million. On the next slide, you'll see that addition or that profit for the current year, for lack of a better term, increased your total fund balance. That's the equity position of the city. So to start the year, you had just shy of $8 million. Went through this past year, brought in $1.2 million more than you spent. That total fund balance is now at $9.2 million. And what this slide does is it takes a look at the last 5 years of fund balance, and by color on the bar graph, it differentiates between different classes of fund balance, and that's tied to GASB, Governmental Accounting Standards Board. They tell you your fund balance needs to be reported on these different categories, and it's basically how available is this money? Is it tied up with something else? Does it have any restrictions to its use? Or is it available for whatever the city might encounter? And the bottom portion here is called the unassigned. That's the money that's available. If there's one number that a reader of the financials is going to look at when they open up your report, if they have 2 minutes, they'd probably go to your fund financial statements, find the general fund, and see how much is in your unassigned fund balance. And then they're going to use that sort of as a barometer to say, how healthy are you? So we're going to take this unassigned portion, which is $7.6 million, and on the next slide we take a closer focus at that available portion, and we're going to compare that to 1 year's spending. And that's a ratio that's often used to say how healthy or evaluating the level of fund balance is saying how much unassigned do we have to go through 1 year's of spending. So for 2022, that number is 17.5%. You could have made it through 17.5% of 2022 just on your unassigned fund balance. So that's sort of universal. Anyone who's reading governmental financial statements will look at general fund unassigned fund balance and sort of put that quick test to it. Now what you'll notice is you've improved over the last 5 years. Most recently, 2022, you improved slightly, basically maintained at that 17-18%. But if you recall, you had that giant increase in spending. So if you set this up as a math problem or as the ratio, you have your $7.6 million of unassigned fund balance on top as a numerator, and on the bottom you're dividing by 43.8 million, whereas in past years, these ratios, we're only looking at the upper $30 million number. So the ratio is going to get thrown a little bit. You get back into normal operations, this ratio would increase, is what I'm trying to illustrate. So 17%, where does that put you? The GFOA is the Government Finance Officers Association, and they're regarded as one of the best practice providers in the industry. They've offered before that 2 months of a year's spending is a good best practice for a minimum level of general fund unassigned fund balance. So you're just above that. 2 months equals roughly 16.7%. You're at 17.5%, so you're above what a large best practice recommends. Really, this number is going to be what this group should design and think it should be. You can create a fund balance policy that says we want this fund balance to be no lower than X dollars or Y%, and then you build budgets, aiming towards a goal of what fund balance level this group believes is adequate. So last is just an observation side, and we do have the contact information there, so that's good. But overall, I think you gathered financially, the city fared pretty well. Fund balance increased $1.2 million for the year. You were able to utilize the grant monies that were received. I know there's a bunch of grant money, especially as of December 31st, 2022. There's a large amount of ARPA cash that was sitting on the books, ready to be spent. The compliance out there, that money needs to be committed by the end of 2024. So we're aware, after talking to management, that money has been spent throughout 2023, and now that number is much lower than what's in the report we're issuing right now. So we'll certainly be following up with that on the next year. Operationally, I mentioned before, this was delayed compared to a normal year, and with that, there were some remarks that we felt needed to be made in our audit report. If you recall, the last time I was here doing this presentation on 2021, we discussed some observations about certain internal controls surrounding finances that we thought could use improvement, particularly with segregation of duties. Something that we talked about where you don't want any one person in charge of certain financial transactions from start to finish. In other words, you want to incorporate other people as checks and balances, and also as a deterrent for fraud. So with the rotation in everything in the comptroller's office and handling the general ledger, there was inconsistency there. So those improvements that were planned, they weren't made. So that finding is there again this year. In addition to that, just based on the number and the significance of journal entries that had to be made to get December 31st, 2022 numbers ready for us. We know that the city contracted with a former comptroller to come in and help reconcile the records. We had to make note of that because it's an additional risk to our audit, that there were so many adjusting entries at the end of the year. So that's also included at the back of the financial statements. You'll see those two findings as well as that compliance finding for ARPA reporting. But outside of that, we did have a chance, like I mentioned before, to meet with the mayor and the comptroller a couple weeks ago and talk about how things are going now. We're optimistic for the improvements that can be made, and we're ready to help. But that wraps up what I was hoping to get through tonight. If anybody had any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Are you the lead partner for the next 3 years?
Yes. Yes.
You rotate every 5 years? Or
There's no required rotation. We have right now 6 partners or directors that can serve as a signer of a report. So if that's something that you're interested in, we can certainly work it out.
No, I'm not questioning your ability.
Oh, no.
I mean, some other places we.
Yeah, so the public authorities like jail, the CPR, they have to do that. That's a requirement that they rotate every 5
Yes.
years. The
So
city-
those, I'm also the lead on those, but it won't go past 5 years. We'll rotate those because it is required.
I appreciate that.
So you're gonna do 2023?
So in light of
We
that,
plan on it, yes.
you have in front of you tonight, a contract going forward for them. And, I do wanna publicly thank Jen and the other staff who helped considerably during this transition. And all this work does not go unnoticed. But with that being said, obviously there's some concerns, right? So, we met, we expressed concern, we talked about, you know, what our plan is, Erica, going forward, you know, the position of the deputy controller in the future. We recognize, you know, checks and balances are extremely important. And while we were doing that, we realized we did not have a contract for 2023 and beyond. So tonight you have in front of you voting to keep them. I am very happy with them. I'm very happy with the work they've done for us, the guidance they've done for us. They've been great with Erica in the transition as well. So it is my personal recommendation, along with the controllers, for that to pass tonight. And then they will be with us. And you all got that stuff in that information. Unfortunately, it was under new business because it was late, but we're good.
We can leave the room before you.
No, no.
We'll be somewhere.
And again, it doesn't have to go out because it's professional service. So, if anybody
Does
should
that
ask.
dollar amount include your travel expenses?
Yes,
All inclusive.
all inclusive for all 3 years.
So can I speak on your behalf of something you said to me that I think is very critical? When they first bid for the city, I don't think they realized the amount of work that was associated and how many hours they would put in. They're welcome to tell you how many extra hours above and beyond they've done for the last few years, but part of this contract going forward is recognizing really what is truly needed and the amount of time with the transition and the placements and things happening. It's fair and equitable for the amount of time that they spent. So that's why you're seeing a little bit of a jump, and he's welcome to tell you how many hours they above and beyond they put in and what they put in the original contract, but that's his to say.
For all the presentation, that's
But it was way above and beyond what was in the original quote, so.
You periodically do spot pop-up audits throughout the course of the year?
as part of
Or is
the
it-
annual financial statement audit.
No, but given the fact that we're trying to catch up now.
Not spontaneous, but we do come out earlier
Okay.
to check on things. That's kind of how we got the dialogue going, recognizing the delay for this past year. But the financial statement audit, typically, there's a piece that needs to be standardized because the closing process needs to be finished, so.
So going forward, anticipated moving up from where they started last year, but they're certainly not gonna be here in April and May, right? We know we have some work to do. We know we have some catching up to do. They were very gracious and moved it up, but we also recognize that we're not gonna have them come here and not be ready for them.
We'll get back to that. That's the goal, though,
Yes,
to get back to.
yes, long term, yes, that is the goal. But this year, it's not gonna happen, but hopefully next year. And by this year, I mean 2023's audit, for clarification.
Right.
Will it get a little less complicated once this ARPA money is gone and you can have a regular audit without all that stuff going and coming and going?
Honestly, it doesn't add too much.
No.
We're pretty familiar, that single audit,
Yeah.
compliance audit, we do that at a lot of clients. So we're seeing this ARPA everywhere.
Yeah.
We're having to test it, and we've gotten pretty efficient at it, so it hasn't been too bad. The first couple were,
Yeah.
we took what we learned and applied it. Well, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for coming down.
Where are you guys out of Buffalo or?
Yes.
Outside of Buffalo, we're